last week's lecture and tonight.
Yeah, so we're moving on to learning unit 2. So I'm starting with a new recording. Okay. So, guys, we are going to look at the role of leaders and team performance. Give me examples of exceptional teams. Teams that you admire, teams that you hope you could learn from, teams you would love to emulate. Examples of exceptional team. The Bokke in all capitals, wonderful. What can we learn from the Bokke? What can a company learn from the Springboks? What are some of the learnings we can take from the Springboks? Because we know that they're an exceptional team. What can we learn from them? Don't know if anyone's ever done that as an exercise, because there is so much learning that can come from looking at great sports teams. What makes the Springboks exceptional that we could include in our own daily actions? Hulle weet nie wat ons weet nie. We know what we know. What are things we can learn? I think for me is that that's exactly it, is that combined strength and the synergy that they create, and how everyone has a strength and strength to contribute. Absolute unity, the idea of a vision, and also a leader that is not scared to take risks. I think we must realize that Russi is a risk taker. And I think there's always a bigger purpose. I think, the attitude that it's okay if we lose games, it's okay if we even lose championships, because our focus now is on the next World Cup. So there's always a bigger picture, there's always a vision that drives everything they do. And I think that to me is the one thing we can take from the Springboks. All right. So if we look, just please excuse me for. So when we look at what makes a team, and I think again, the Springboks are a team. I think there's no doubting strategy matters. Absolutely, Kansani. Your strategy and the ability to change your strategy depending on the circumstances. You're 100% right, Kansani. So if we look what a team is, I think there are a couple of things that differentiate between a group and a team. The first one is the idea of complementary skills. Now, those complementary skills means that 1 + 1 = 3. It is the fact that you have a core group of individuals who essentially fit together absolutely perfectly, like the perfectly built Lego, that those skills complement them, and that the bigger picture and the idea of synergy exists all the time. The second one is that common purpose. And I think for me, what makes the Springboks so very good is whether you're playing on the day, or whether you're on the bench, or whether you are in the broader squad, you understand what the common purpose is. And I think that's why it's possible for Rassi to interchange players in the way that he does, because of their ability to blend and gel and understand the common purpose all the time. Very clear performance goals. And I think the one thing that if we look at the success of Rassi, I mean, his KPIs must look astonishing, because 2 World Cups delivered, multiple championships delivered. This weekend is an acid test. I think this weekend is a serious test because the New Zealanders have played together. But we know that with Rossi, there will always be a surprise, and that the guys will pitch up on Saturday. And then also the idea of mutual accountability. I think everyone there is a leader, and everyone expects everyone to be fantastic and expects everyone to do their job. And I think that's part of the culture of the team. in terms of a work group, I think these people collaborate, but generally just rely on each other for either individual input and then obviously a little bit of accountability. I think work groups lack the synergy. I think a work group would be a broader organization where finance relies on accountants, etc. But within finance, the small team of financial managers would be what I would suggest is the team. The group of accountants would be a team, and maybe they're a team together. If I look at that as your definition, in the group of individuals you work with, is it a team? Who believes that they are leading a team versus who believes that they are just leading groups? Something is missing. And again, it's a bit like that notion of management versus leadership. There's something almost romantic about talking about a team where a work group is far less romantic. It suggests that it is lesser than. And I think people love to think of themselves as a team. But if you look at that definition, sometimes organizations miss the point of what a team really is. So if I look at the typical teams that there are, who is part of a departmental team? Tell me what departmental team you're part of. Who are the finance people here? Oh gosh, are the finance people doing the more difficult courses? Very nice, Tam. Well, you absolutely lead a team, Tam. That's 100%. Who is part of marketing here? Yeah, Tam, part of marketing. Can I see with a show of hands? Who are the marketers here? Oh gosh, the marketers are also doing difficult courses. Who is part of operations? Quality assurance, regulatory affairs. Wow. Okay, operations, Jay. Who's part of HR? Anyone here part of an HR team? I know we've got people part of HR. Kyle, okay, very cool. And then supply chain, HR remuneration and benefits, very nice, Malelo. And supply chain people. So essentially, each of us will be part of a departmental team. I know that we have senior managers here, so you'd be in charge of a department and sometimes in charge of multiple departments. And then production, service, and leadership teams. I'm going to do it in reverse order. Leadership teams, because the world has gone so insane that it's impossible for one CEO, one leader to try and cater for all the changes in the environment. So we see these leadership teams that develop. And then service teams, these service teams that are there to provide a particular service to the organization. So HR would be a service team and your production teams. Now, it's interesting in terms of those production teams, we see that sometimes you're part of the amount of the amount of IR cases that you're part of. Are you the cause of the IR cases, Tam? Yeah, one of my
No, I
my
hope not.
one of my jobs at some point was to chair disciplinary hearings, and yeah, I did not enjoy that. I have to admit, and I won't do that anymore. But yeah, and I suppose because my silly masters is in labor law, that people thought I would be the right person to do it. Yeah, and then production teams. So to just say, guys, a production team could be a group of people working together on a particular component. Because we know, for example, that we don't have those traditional production lines anymore. Self-directed teams, we've spoken about a couple of times now, where you have the flat structure and you have the three levels. I don't want to draw this again. You guys know this by now, where you have the executive team there, the senior management team there, and the rest of the organization populated by those self-managed, self-directed teams. The key thing in terms of those self-directed teams is how empowered those individuals are. The reality is that those individuals and the teams take over the organization. They make capital budget proposals. They hire their own employees. They fire their own team members. It's a significant evolution of power. And then advisory teams. So anyone here in legal advice, worked as a legal advisor? Anyone with a law background? Okay. And then project teams, we see project teams often in places like manufacturers where you need to launch a new model of something, and the project team would work together into putting together the details around that model. And then virtual teams, yeah, I think all of us are part of virtual teams. I'm part of a variety of virtual teams. And then communities of practice. These communities of practice are often done through things like total quality management, where you have the total quality management community of practice. We also have, what are they called? Quality circles is another example that would fit into that. I think the reality, the reason we've gone from your traditional organization to this is because of these things. The increased competition. I think the one thing that technology has brought us is the ability of small companies to all of a sudden rise up and become giants. And also the insanity of the world, so many interconnected elements in the environment that it's very difficult to always predict what the next change will be. And then the expectation of doing more with less. Who now in their current organization have lost team members and are expected to deliver more? You say that again. Who has lost team members despite the expectation that you need to deliver more? The idea of doing more with fewer people. I'm prepared to bet that everyone here works in an organization that you expect to deliver more, and the reality is you have fewer employees. Yeah, I mean, it is a real struggle. And it comes down to almost that we now have technology, but we've got to use technology, so you need fewer people, and you get the impression that companies now want their pound of flesh. Is that an unfair comment? That companies expect more from fewer people? I mean, I work, yeah, at a couple of campuses, and I clearly have seen this over the last 28 years. Yeah, I think it is the truth. It's the reality, and the expectations on individuals are insane. Well, that's exactly it, and that's why burnout issues are so high. Else here also, it's true. And the reality is, what I found interesting the other day is one of yeah, I've always got to be so careful when I share information. But a colleague of mine was told, well, just do it this weekend. And I'm thinking, everyone is expected to work now weekends. Who here works weekends? And I will put my hand up because I work weekends. I did take the last weekend off because my son is back, and he's well is going leaving for the UK this week. Overtime is standard time. I work weekends, and it irritates the living daylights out of me. It frustrates me so much. And the expectation is that people will just do, guys. And then also the idea of doing, yeah, the idea of cutting overheads. Now, well, that's exactly, it's never official, but we know that you're expected to jump in. I quite like that. Overtime is standard time. And in terms of our law, once you earn above a certain threshold, you don't get paid income. But I think a lot of people misunderstand that it doesn't mean that you don't have to be rewarded. because if you don't pay people for overtime, it becomes slavery. And I think that's the real challenge here, is that people sometimes miss that in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And then, guys, I think what we've seen, no, Moloko, that is insane. I don't know, guys. We recently retrenched 60% of a company's workforce and handed the remaining workers work phones to be reachable when they are at home. Well, it is illegal. I mean, in the old days, that would have mean that you are on standby and you'd have to have a standby allowance. And again, in terms of the law, you need a 12-hour work break between your work days. So technically, I should not be working before 8:30 tomorrow because this class goes on to 8:30 because there has to be a 12-hour work break. But none of these things apply anymore, guys. I mean, these are pie in the sky, hopeful things in a piece of paper. And the piece of paper, unfortunately, is the Basic Condition Employment Act. What we've seen in terms of modern teams is this different skill structure. And I think this is where the notion of the knowledge worker is always going to find a place for itself. The fact that in some instances and in some industries, the average worker carries around the factors of production in their head. Please hold on a second. Let me say that again, that in some instances, no, in a lot of instances, the average worker carries around the factors of production in their brain. Because generally, if you have a computer, imagine what you can do as a computer with a computer. Because the factors of production, because you understand processes, etc. And that's why people go out on their own. And that's why we have this different skill structure. We have fewer people, we expect more from individuals, and we expect them to be qualified. We don't want to have people checking on them. So we get rid of our supervisors. And then different patterns of leadership. And the key pattern to me is always the idea of empowerment. And then how we monitor and control. Anyone want to share some interesting monitor and control systems that you have? I recently read an article which I found, yeah, let's just say rather interesting, where AI now becomes part of monitoring, where you have cameras watching individuals and AI determining whether you actually, oh, I can show you the article. I don't know if I'm going to find the exact article. Productivity. And the thinking is, I don't know where it is. So you can see the kinds of things. No, I definitely won't. But you can see, I just searched that and you can have a glance at it, guys. Have a glance at some of these AIs that are there. Well, I don't know because you can get AI to monitor people who work from home. I'm not going to read that out loud, Nadine. I'm not going to read that. I'm not saying a word, not saying a word. But it becomes even more difficult. So the AI then decides that you have to be charged because it believes that you are not performing at a level. Very, very worth look. Go find some of these articles, guys. Please go and find some of these articles. It's a heck of an interesting reading. Okay, and when we say monitoring and control systems, AI is now going to do that. So, in terms of team leadership, I think there are two things. I think you have to ensure that people achieve their objectives, but also you have to make sure that you create an environment where people don't burn out. I think for me, that becomes essential because if we look at the burnout figures and the cost of burnout in this country, the idea of having things to achieve, but doing it in a way that you still look after the human aspect of your employees. Tam, I don't know if you remember last year when I did that speech at Durban North, that one of my students had to be booked off at 23. She's a chartered accountant, and she shared how she was booked off because of burnout. Imagine being 23 and you've already burnt out. I mean, you are pushing yourself. There were 25-year-olds that had been booked off for burnout. Anyone here want to share with us whether they've been booked off with burnout? Anyone want to share that? You want to share that with us, Nompumelelo?
Yes. Evening. In 2024, I had burnout, and when I was being admitted for, obviously, I think not a psychiatric ward, but something like that. There was a waiting list because all the hospitals in Joburg were full, and that for me was mind blowing. That there was so much burnout going around that there was actually no place in the private facilities to house me, and I had to wait 10 working days. And by the time those 10 working days came around, I had so much to do. I just went back to work. So yeah, that was my very odd experience. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah. Anyone else want to share? I think it's the reality of yeah, it's across a lot of companies. And I think you guys know what burnout is. It's when your body gives up in terms of its emotional, its cognitive, its physical capabilities. You read stories about burnout that people who have burnt out some morning just realize that they don't have the ability to get out of bed anymore. And it's a real thing. But then if we go back to this, it's that and it's the flatter structure. All of this drives burnout. And guys, in South Africa, where you have a significantly high unemployment rate, there will always be someone to take your place. But again, I would assume we work for organizations where we value people enough to realize the importance of individuals. So, in terms of team leadership, two elements achieving things, but also looking after the human element. And I think the reality is we've seen that managing teams, self-directed teams work. We see it in Google, we see it in a variety of places. But I think we must always remember that it is your senior management team that creates the environment, creates the opportunities for people to take charge of their lives at work and are there as a safety net, are there as a support. Sorry, please excuse me. I think the reality is that even though we have self-managed teams where leadership in the team rotates amongst the team, you still need that kind of broader safety net support from your senior managers. So when we look at the elements that will give you team performance, the first one is the fact that you have team processes. And those team processes involve a variety of things. First of all, how people work together, but there are elements around conflict management. There are elements in terms of how we deal with creativity. There are elements of how we actually communicate and understand and create understanding. And then obviously the reality is that you cannot divorce what happens in the team from the insanity that is the external environment. So there has to be some process that tracks and updates and is aware of changes and translates those potential changes into actions within the team. And then team goals. One of my favorite kinds of teams are what they call mission directed teams. Now, this is a concept from the 90s, so I don't know how many of these still exist. So that mission did work teams. It's a wonderful, wonderful idea. And please have a read of this, where you have a work team where essentially they create their own mission, where they have a submission that feeds into the organization's vision and mission statement. And you can see the kinds of focus areas that they have. The key thing, it's that they are autonomous, so they take charge of their lives at work, and it's part of being a self-managed work team. And I think the reality is, in these modern teams, leadership rotates between the different team leaders. They are within the team. So you will have a new team leader depending on the project that you're part of. Very difficult to do in traditional companies, because you're expecting your supervisors to give people the freedom to take charge of their lives. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop there because I'm going to rush and I don't want to rush. Any questions, any comments?